Okay. So DW Friend is your stage name. How did you come up with that sort of stage name?
Well, my first name is Dennis. I don't have a middle initial. My father's first name was Donald. His middle name was Wesley. I always liked how DW sounded together, so I took, my first initial and my father's first initial, put it with his middle initial, and then Friend came from a Joyce Carol Oates short story called "Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been?" where there's a character who's the personification of the devil, and his name was Arthur Friend. So I always thought it just sounded. My original stage name I was going to go with was going to be Julia Roberts, and Corey said to me, "No," he's like, "Think of something else."
Yeah.
So, uh, so I went with that. So family, and then a fantastic Joyce Carol Oates novel. Where are you going? Where have you been?
Yeah. Um, how old are you?
48.
48?
Yeah, we've been doing this since we started in '95. So
Yeah.
we're lifers. We don't know any better.
Have you guys ever played out this way before?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, the we've the Brickbats. We played our first tour was down in North Carolina. One of Corey's childhood friends, this guy Craig, had booked us a couple shows. I don't remember exactly where. I wish I would have kept like a diary of all the places we played, but we played North Carolina a bunch of times. And then after the Brickbats had ended for the first time, and Corey and I started up the Brides, we did like a U.S. tour, so we pretty much we hit a lot of states. We've been to
You
North
guys
Carolina.
have another band together?
Oh yeah, yeah. After uh, when Paul initially had our original bass player, when he had left the band to go out to California, Corey and I had put out a real kind of goofy glam rock record called Rock and Roll Star Destroyer. That it was just me and him, just having some fun in the studio. And then after that, we wanted to do something kind of death rocky, but filtered through pulp and like kind of Brit pop. And we
Yeah.
ended up forming a band called the Brides, which it sounds nothing like what we had intended it to, but turned into a full band where we had Greg Jaw, who is now the current Brickbats bass player, and Julia Gulia was our keyboardist. And so we had done that for a bunch of years before we decided to resurrect the Brickbats.
No. Yeah, I know you guys have been like kind of on and off with it. I saw in your Instagram bio, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I think I saw somebody on Reddit said you guys played out in Fayetteville at some point.
And that's very likely.
Yeah. Tell me about your life up until the Brickbats were formed. Like, what was your childhood like?
Uh, I grew up here. I grew up on Long Island. I currently live on Long Island. Corey grew up on Long Island. We didn't know each other then. Uh, I went to school to be a painter at SUNY New Paltz, which is a state university college here in New York. So I was pursuing a BFA, and during the beginning of my studies, even though I was a hard worker, I saw a lot of other people that were much harder workers than I was, and natural artists. And I decided I should have a plan B. So my plan B was to get a degree in art education, which is what I do. And it was during that time I was taking a remedial math course because I had flunked out of, or was a horrible math student, and I failed their proficiency exam at the college, so I had to take like a math course for no credit. And once I started taking the class, everything came back to me. So I was doing really well. And I met this girl in the class who was doing miserably and had asked me to help her, to kind of tutor her. And as we're hanging out, she said, "You should really meet my ex-boyfriend. He's a lot like you, and I think you guys would get along." And it turned out to be Corey. Like he
Yeah.
had come up to visit, and we kind of hit it off. And then he transferred to New Paltz, and we weren't like best of friends when he was going to New Paltz, but we were in each other's social circles, and we had formed, or were members. I don't know whose idea it was. We were in a Kiss cover band called Stoonie Kiss, which I mean, but it was a kind of uh, I don't want to say a joke, but we had two Gene Simmons playing at the same time, and our costumes were made out of like tin foil and just really cheap looking on purpose. And I think that's actually where the seeds of the Brickbats came in, like with this Kiss cover band, because it was it was schlocky and definitely way more punk rock than Kiss ever sounded. And we wrote one original song called, I don't know if you're a Kiss fan, but one of their albums, Rock and Roll Over, there's no song called that, so we wrote a song that was titled Rock and Roll Over, just to kind of be jerks.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm not really all that familiar with Kiss, but I have friends that are. So
You're not missing anything at this point. As I've explained to friends of mine who are about my age, who never got into them, I said, well, if you didn't, the first record I ever bought at a garage sale was a Kiss record for 50 cents. And that's kind of where it all started. And so unless you're 5 years old getting into the band, it's at this point, it's just silly.
yeah,
We wouldn't, it was a time and a place type thing.
yeah, I feel you. Do you have anything to add about like the band's history, like just how you guys were formed and how everything?
Well,
Yeah.
Corey was a year ahead of me in New Paltz. He had transferred in from a 2-year school, and he was a year ahead of me. And he kept talking about that once he was done with New Paltz, he was going to move back to his parents had moved out of state. He was living in New York. They moved out of state, so he was kind of living out of his car more or less, and had said at that point, once he graduated, he was going to move into the city. And then he had this idea. He was doing all these demos for of songs that became Brickbat songs. And I was finishing out my senior year up there at New Paltz, and he had sent me a cassette of it, and I thought that the demos were incredible. And I had said, if look, if you don't find a drummer, because he was already being a year ahead of me, going to start auditioning drummers. And so I said, if you don't find someone that clicks when I come to move back down in the metropolitan area, I'd like to play. And at this point, he had already met Paul, who was our first bass player, who was only like 19 years old. He was from New Jersey. Corey had met him through a mutual friend, I believe, and I'm not 100% certain, because we're going back now, 95. It was like Lollapalooza, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds were playing, and our friend Peter had met Paul there. And Peter was in Corey's former band, which was called Floor Show, and they had broken up. And he met this guy Paul that was a bass player, and said, you should talk to my friend Corey. He's looking to start up a band. So they started working together. So they actually, the very first Brickbats EP that was released, or a single, was just Corey and Paul. They used a drum machine for it. I think it was called like Stuck on the 7 Train or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it was like, just them and a drum machine. And then they had auditioned some drummers, and it didn't work out. And then summertime rolled around. I'd finished up at New Paltz, and they said, do you want to like audition, play? So I played with them, and I think it was either the next day or 2 days after, I'd sat down and run through all the songs with them, that we played our first show in New Jersey. So I was only in the band for like 2 days before playing the first show, which was with the Blank 77. I don't know if you know them. They were a New Jersey punk band, and it was at some like VFW hall in Jersey. And if there are photos from it, and we could tell we didn't quite have our look down yet. Like Paul was already kind of self-realized in what this band was going to end up looking like. I was like in a work shirt and not a good looking tie, if a tie at all. And Corey was still kind of more gothier, so it wasn't quite the death rock thing yet. It all kind of happened, I guess, organically over then the next couple of years. Before I no longer dye my hair. For many years I had dyed my hair, but when I didn't dye my hair in the band, Paul used to refer to me as Chewbacca. So.
Are you like a Star Wars fan?
I'm not a fanatic. I mean, I saw a lot of them in the movies, but I kind of after Jar Jar Binks, I kind of left the franchise, and it seems like it's gotten so far beyond what I don't know if I'd be able to just jump back in at this point. It's an investment of time, and
Yeah.
I'm not immortal, so I've only got so many hours to watch.
Yeah, I feel you. What inspired the Brickbats name? Like, how did you guys decide on the?
And that was already there before I was in the band. I know there were a few other ideas that were tossed around, and again, I might now kind of be because when Corey and I were starting the Brides, we were coming up with different ideas, and I can't remember if X is for. I think I think Corey at the time was sending me ideas for band names. I mean, this was all like of course, pre-internet, pre-cell phone. I have a lot of like letters and postcards from Corey saying like, this is here are the demos, these are the band names. I think X's for Eyes was one of the like things he was considering. As far as Brickbats, I'm not sure if I could credit it to Corey or Paul, like who came up with it. It's a literary term, which would make sense because Corey was an English major, and he's a brilliant writer. He still write. He just put out a book recently of poetry. So so Brickbats being the alliterative term, but also I guess it just sounds cool. And
Yeah.
there was a band that we had some point had come across like a CD that was called Brickbats, but we said no, we're the Brickbats, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And we never had an issue. Like no one ever said, hey, stop using the name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the band's first song? I know you joined like a little bit later, but
Which one? Which song? Like do I remember the very first song?
Yeah.
It probably was that I played on was probably Starting With You, or like everything off the Sing You Dead record. Like those were like all the early everything that we had in the beginning ended up being recorded for the debut album, the Sing You Dead album.
Right.
And I think in my memory, like Starting With You might have actually been the first song that I started rehearsing with them on, and then Jane Doe was another early one. But as far the songs were pretty much complete. Like Corey had like even drum machine demos to set the tempos and everything. So for the songs that ended up on Sing You Dead, I didn't have a tremendous amount of like kind of input. It like later on where we were all working together, like for Creepy Crawly and Monster Party. That's when like we started kind of, and I hate to use the term jamming, but we would like kind of work together. Like I remember Funeral Drive, we used to, because we didn't have like an official rehearsal space in New York City. We would go to like rent studios by the hour. We'd rent studios in Brooklyn. And then we would also, to save money, Paul was still living at home out in New Jersey, and we'd go out to his place and play in his garage. And that's where we kind of worked on a lot of the songs, and we'd like, kind of riff on something and then listen back to the rehearsal tapes and kind of figure out, all right, we could turn this into something, we could turn that into something. So I think the second album was more of a group effort, and the first album was really kind of more of Corey and his vision.
Yeah. And you said Sing You Dead was the first. Do you know like how many albums you guys put out in total, like off the top of your head?
Well, yeah, we put, well, with the original lineup, we put out 3 albums, and then we had recorded a 4th album called that was intended to be released, called Let the Good Times Rot. And then it just, Paul had left the band, and then so we were kind of, we didn't finish. We have rough mixes of it. We never finished the mixing. We didn't master it. So at some point, we do know that there are like bootleg copies of it out, like because we did have rough mixes on cassette, and we know that people were trading those and had got their hands on those. Unfortunately, Jacques Cohen, who did all of our recordings, passed away a bunch of years ago from a brain aneurysm. And a lot of stuff is lost. We did, one of his good friends managed to reach, kind of help us all. He kind of went through all his real, because when we recorded back in the late 90s, everything was reel to reel. So
Right.
those were easy to locate. We got our reel to reel tapes back. But then, you had things like technology like ADATs and all these like kind of now that are totally antiquated things. And so we did manage to find most of what we needed. There's some backing vocals and stuff like that that are missing because I don't even remember what it was recorded on, like format wise, because we were limited to the tracks we had on the board we were using. So then we had these other, what at the time, modern technology that now is just again antiquated. And we had sent the tapes, the reel to reels, to a studio in Queens that digitized them. So at some point, and Corey's really the one who handles like the mixing and that stuff. Hopefully we'll get that fourth and final original lineup one out. But when we decided to kind of resurrect the band,
Yeah.
Corey and I, we recorded our Return of the Living Brickbats album, and that was done as just Corey and I. And then beyond that, we did I can't even remember the wordy title of it. Some EP that Greg, who's now the permanent bass player, Greg Jaw, played on as well. So, and then we have other EPs from earlier in the day when we were the original lineup. And then in between that time, I'll shoehorn this in. We had Jason Trioxin, who was in Mr. Monster. He was our bass player for a little while.
I was
And
about to ask about him.
yeah, and before the first like show we did, kind of playing again live for the first time, and at that point, I don't know if it was like 15 years or something, we had two bass players playing at the same time because we Paul had passed in between. After he left the band, back in 2006, he took his own life. So that's when, after his death, Corey and I were like, all right, we're never going to do the Brickbats again. But then, a promoter in New York was saying, hey, would you guys he kind of kept asking us to do his night, and we were fans of the night that he did, the Monster Hop, and we said, all right, let's do it. And so then we had our friend Dana, who goes by Mick Royale, on bass, and who's actually from North Carolina. And we had also asked Jason to do it. So they both kind of played, kind of trading on and off. And then, Mick had his own thing going on. So we stuck with Jason for a bunch of years as our, second official bass player.
What was your relationship with Jason like?
We first, one of the bands who helped the Brickbats out a lot in the beginning was a band called the Empire Hideous, and Jason was their roadie at first, and he also played in a band called Angel Sin that we had put out a comp of that, and they were on it, and we also shared a lot of bills with them. So he was just a buddy from the scene, and I'm not sure if he, like, how it all kind of worked out, like if it just he and I had run into one another, or if we specifically reached out to him, or if he reached out to us. That I'm a little blurry on, but he wanted to play, and he knew all the songs. So like we had a bunch of rehearsals before the show, and he's I would say he was a lifelong, or a friend of the band since we started in '95. He was probably like a teenager in the clubs when he used to be helping out the Empire Hideous, and they were huge. They were, Mike Hideous in particular was like huge about getting the Brickbats to a big help. He would have us open up for them, and us being the total dicks we were at the time, we used to refer to them as the Empire Idiots in interviews. And I used to put out a fanzine in celebration of myself called the DW Friend Club. And I used to always, like, I'd take photos with people and then write like ridiculous stories, making them like look, foolish. So, and he was always a good sport about allowing me to kind of, use him, Mike. And, it was just friends in the scene.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to like the projects and all that you guys have put out over the years, like what do you know about like the headspace for each? Like just where you were at mentally when
well, for I mean the Brickbats, the first go round, it just I think the bottom line with the band was we all really got along well until we didn't, as friends. Like, we all shared the same sense of humor. Like, Corey's an incredibly funny guy, Paul was an incredibly funny guy. I've got a good sense of humor, so it was just like, it was I hate to say it, like, a gang, but like, just we had fun. We all shared a very similar sensibilities. So I think it was like the camaraderie, like the band wouldn't have lasted as, the time it did. And same thing, like why I continue to make music with Corey. It's like, I love him like a brother, and we just get along so well. And that's kind of been, we certainly kind of egg each other on, like, to like, as far as like entertaining dumb ideas, like, because right before Paul had left the band, like things started getting like, we used to use there's a song in one of the Marx Brothers movies, where they sing "Whatever It Is, I'm Against It," and that's kind of what he started to do towards the end of the first uh, incarnation of the Brickbats. Like, Corey would hand demos in and say, what about these songs, and he would kind of veto everything, and we're trying to get him to agree on artwork and things like that on the Monster Party record. It all became tough, but in spite of all that, Corey and I were willing to, like, put up with it, because again, we all got along, had a lot of laughs together. And then we had just finished rehearsal at a place on Avenue A in Lower Manhattan, and Paul said, "Well, I'm going to California. I'm going to play with Jetan Damone, who was from Christian Death." He had struck up some kind of, again, now it's the beginning days of the internet. He had struck up some kind of relationship with her, and he was going to drive out to California, picking her son up on the way in Las Vegas, and then he was going to live out there and kind of form a band with her. And so, like, I remember Corey and I kind of looked at each other in a way, relieved, like, all right, because this band was getting difficult to operate. So we started the Rock and Roll Star Destroyer record, and that was just fun. So the headspace there, I know, is clearly, it was like, let's just get in there and have fun. And we just like recorded, like, that album was, just us goofing around. Like, there's one song, I can't remember the name of the song, but we decided we would have an end like "Hey Jude" from the Beatles, like the na 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 na. But we had na 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 hey now, and we did it for like 20 minutes, just over and over again. So like this, we eventually edited it down for the final thing. But it was goofy, it was fun. Our producer Jacques wanted to kill us when we were done with it, because he had to hear us singing it again, because we're doing this like live to tape over and over again. But it was just fun. And then he and I also, we had done a gothic coffee house duo that we called the Black Caffeine, and we used to go to the Continental, which was a bar in Manhattan. We'd go to happy hour, then go back to his house and like just record all these songs. And that's also kind of where the Brides had started, like, where, like, all right, we got the fun out of the way, now let's sit down and try to do something kind of artistic and creative. And so that's how we started the Brides. And Greg, who was that bass player, he was in another horror rock band that Paul had actually introduced us to, called the Hollow Teens. They were like the Brickbats contemporaries, and I even had sat in as their drummer a couple times when they were in between drummers. So that's all kind of incestuous, like. And also with Jason coming in from Mr. Monster, and just people helping each other out. But so the Brickbats, I'd say, kind of like a family. Rock and Roll Star Destroyer was fun, then the Brides became something artistic. But also, the bottom line, it's always like kind of friendship. Like, all the bands are like, we hang out with each other, and it's just like, making the music is what we do together, rather than doing a pickup basketball game. We sit down and say, hey, let's write some songs. Right. And when we started to rewrite Brickbat songs for the Return of the Living, like, Corey, who was living down in Virginia, actually he might have been living in Queens at that time. Either way, he would, he'd come over, I'd go over to his place, and we say, all right, we know what our songs sound like. Let's write a Brickbats song. We sit, kind of hash it out and just hanging out, writing a song in the spirit of the band.
Yeah. Um, and do you have like, other than like Rock and Roll Star Destroyer and all that, do you have like any other work outside of the Brickbats?
I mean, I play with a bunch of people. Like, I've played in Psycho Charger for, and in fact, Corey was in Psycho Charger for a period of time. Greg was in Psycho Charger. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're like they actually started out as the Psychonauts, and they were also part of like the kind of New York City horror rock scene. And Jimmy, who's like he's the only consistent member of the band, Jimmy Psycho. Um, he was a friend and had just kind of at some point I ended up being the drummer, and then I'd asked Greg got in the band, and then Corey was in the band, and it was just kind of an evolving cast of characters. But we did some great shows. We played on the Queen Mary out in Long Beach, California. We got to open up for X. We got to open up for the Buzzcocks. We played like with the Dwarves here in New York City. So that Psychocharger took up a lot of my time. Then I've been a drummer in the Memphis Morticians a bunch of years, which is Paul from the Brickbats had, because he was a guitar player and he was playing bass in the Brickbats. He wanted to continue to play guitar, so he had formed a band called the Memphis Morticians, aside from us, operating at the same time in the city. And then I was like their drummer, their third drummer, their sixth drummer, their ninth drummer. And then he had even left the band, and I'd still continue kind of filling in as they needed. And so I would continue to play with them. And prior to the pandemic, I was still kind of their fill-in drummer. And then also the bass player of that band, Pete Von Erickson, and we are playing a kind of almost like a jump jive garage rock band called Fright Barker and Sons. And like some of the players in the band are like these totally pro horn jazz guys that read off charts, while he and I are just like these ham-fisted monkeys that kind of just play by sound. And so I mean, those are all the things that I've got going on. And most of the bands I play in tend to be just because I like the people in the band. Like I like hanging out with my friend Pete Von Erickson, so we play in Fright Barker together. We play in Memphis Morticians together.
Yeah. And bringing it back to the Brickbats, there were like 10 songs in particular that interest me.
Okay.
Do you know anything about like
lyric wise
inspiration, just like what all Corey had going on?
Well, I'll do my best, but you could always try to reach out to him. I know he's super busy. He works a full-time job, as we all do, but then he also does a lot of freelance writing. But right. Go ahead. I'll help you the best I can.
Okay. Well, this was a song that was like, I guess, my gateway song to the Brickbats, but She Walks at Midnight. Do you know anything about the
as far as lyrically goes, I'd be guessing, but I will say I'm a huge fan of his lyrics. Like, I think kind of what elevates us from a lot of other horror rock bands are his lyrics. Like, they're, to me, it's like a short story in a song. So I don't know what that one's about, but that is one that we did collectively write. And I could tell you musically what we were influenced by, because I do remember that. Corey and I coming from meeting up at New Paltz, and New Paltz had a really good music scene. And one of the bands that came out of there was this band that was called Valoria, that then became Analore. And they were very influenced by a lot of 4 AD bands. And like they played really slow. Like they had a lot of power, but everything was really slow. So that was like one of our first songs where we intentionally said, let's try to play as slow as we can with a bum 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 bum. Just keep it like as slow. That's as slow as we were kind of able to get that song. And then also like Parts of the Worst Thing, also off that same record. Like we tried to do that, like keep it slow, airy, and kind of atmospheric.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that for the Worst Thing, but like I know what you're saying now that you mention it.
Yeah.
How about Run for Your Love Life?
I, I, again, I could be wrong here. That I think was kind of a little bit of a borrow from the Beatles. They have a song called "Run for Your Life, Little Girl," if you can. So it's it's kind of just a borrowing from the tradition of rock and roll.
Right. How about Serenade?
That was off of if I'm remembering, was that off our Party Seriously EP?
That was off of well, I discovered it off of the autobiography one.
Oh, okay, so that one was off Party Seriously, which was an EP. That again, lyrically, I have zero part in. I mean, I occasionally write down a dopey phrase that will get into a song, but the main lyrical content, that's all Corey. But musically, came off of our EP called the Party Seriously EP, where those were, because I don't want to kind of diminish what we do and what we've done, but we kind of had two modes. It was either balls out rock or mopey goth. And so that was like, we had a mopey goth EP that we called the Party Seriously, which I did name that the Party Seriously EP, and that came from a line in some 80s movie. Are you chicks ready to party seriously?
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah.
How about Like Mayflies? You know anything about that one?
Uh, I know that's a tough one to play live. That like we've often brought back into the set list, then say no, that's not working out. I can't. I'm sorry. Another, like, again, lyrics are all his bag. So like, I'm sure you probably want to know lyrically. That's a Corey question.
Yeah.
But I could, when we're done with this interview, I'll send him a message and see if you guys can then set that up so you could kind of ask the lyrical questions. Musically, I think that is one that Corey probably presented to Paul and I, I'll say 90% done, that we then kind of all worked together to just finish out. But that was like one that I'm fairly certain he had brought in.
Right.
I think, and I think it is like, based on the lifespan of the mayflies, kind of the fact that they have such a limited lifespan.
Yeah. Do you mind if I go through just the last couple?
Yeah, no trouble. I feel bad that I can't provide you with better answers, but
you're not the lyricist. I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of, I thought I'd ask, just throw them.
Sure.
They
No
kind
problem.
of fascinate me, but yeah. You know anything about Hysterical?
I think that one lyrically is kind of just at face value, but that one musically was one that we kind of all wrote together. That it was probably, I think Paul started it all with that, like the kind of that repetitive bass riff, and I ultimately, in our mind, and again, oftentimes what we think or doesn't really translate, but in our mind it was like kind of a big 1980s inspired hit, like very kind of big 80s dance hit.
Yeah.
But lyrically, just I think what you read is kind of what his intentions were with the song. But that's one that we even would, when we were the Brides, we would pull out occasionally because it always got people moving.
Yeah. I could definitely see that being the case. You know anything about Body Snatcher from the Monster Party?
Yeah, of course. That one I do. That one was written by Paul and Corey, and they had lived together for some point, and they were like both kind of dicking around on the guitars, and Corey only had the song written up to the second verse.
Right.
And then Paul, so they were kind of running through it. And so it was what Corey had brought in. And then Paul, just rather than ending the song, did he came from space to eat your face. And so we added another verse and another chorus. And so that's what extended the song to whatever it runs at now, like from being 1 minute to 1 minute and 26 seconds. But so that was them kind of working together, and then Paul just kind of throwing in that last bit, which always makes me laugh, because that was Paul. Like we had at some point considered putting out a fan club release called Shout at the Demos, where like it was just like us entertaining all kinds of stupid ideas, and there's a lot of very funny songs that like Paul had written during that time period. One called in fact Gonna Write a Song, which was always one of my favorites of his.
Yeah.
But, so that song was kind of Corey, and then Paul's like little bit of humor there with he came from singing it from the other people's point of view.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounded like kind of forced, but it was kind of clean how he came in at the same time too.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure, like I think he wanted like again in our minds, I think he wanted Paul wanted to deliver that with like a Stiv Bators from the Dead Boys approach, or I could be totally inventing it, as I often do, like
Yeah. What about She's So Victorian?
Lyrically, you're gonna have to ask Corey. I think I know what it's about, but I wouldn't feel comfortable kind of speaking on his behalf about that. But that's one that definitely came as a demo from him, and it's I would say based on a personal relationship. If he wanted to like elaborate at some point, then but
That was the song that got me to buy Monster Party this morning off Bandcamp. So
fantastic. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I always love the little breakdown there in the middle.
yeah. And then off of Return of the Brickbats, do you know anything about the Shatter Splatter Splatter?
Yes, that I can, because those we all wrote together. Like
Part one and part two.
It's and all right, I don't know. It's all based on Michael Myers.
Yeah.
And so we wrote it in two parts because we felt that people don't have the attention span to like necessarily listen to both. Musically, with the drums, we were going for a Susie's and the Banshees kind of approach. I taped the tambourine to the floor tom so that you have that kind of rattling going through it. As far as anything else, I don't know. I guess we were just going for like a very cinematic song with that one. So, and that's, I mean, I love parts 1 and part 2. When we had first kind of worked on the rough mixes, it was summertime, and I was just blasting it in my backyard, going like, I'm a fan of the band, and I am also, like, I'm a fan of our band. Like I think we make great music.
I do too.
Well, thank you.
Me too. And we talked a little bit about the cover art. Where did you say you get like ideas for your album covers and all that again?
Well, the first each one is different. The first album, Sing You Dead, Paul took that photo. We had taken that in our rehearsal space.
That's a really cool picture. Like I really like that one.
He had, well, I'm trying. Wait, when we're on the ground with the coins on our eyes.
Yeah.
That's not the original cover. That actually, so all the reissues I handled, the original cover art of that was a photo, like just a group photo, and it's just kind of an odd photo. The photo that we ended up using for the reissue was on the inside, like in the insert, and Corey and I said, why didn't we use that for the cover? It's so much of a better photo. So that's why that is now, yes, the cover of the reissued version. So if you can, I'm sure probably somewhere you could find the original cover, but it's just like a group photo, and the lighting's weird, and Paul looks like super short, which is, so I'm not sure why he even selected, that picture. The second album, we all kind of worked together on the art to that. The original, and I'm not sure what we even did with the reissue, but the original cover art we had done in Corey and Paul's apartment. No, that was just Paul's apartment. We had a friend of ours, Josh, photograph us. They had very low ceilings, so any of the band photos, like, we took actually on our knees so that we looked as if we were standing, because we couldn't really stand properly and have it make a good photo. But we had always thought that the better, like, or Corey and I in later years said, the back cover was better than the front cover. Monster Party, we just, no one could kind of agree on what to do with that cover art. So I ended up doing some block prints, like really hastily, which is what became like the CD version of the Monster Party. The one that we just released digitally, I kind of did what I would consider to be a more finished version. It's like takes the idea but just makes it look good, you
Yeah.
know, because like when we first released it, it was just like, all right, let me just do something that, you know, Paul's okay with, and we kind of did that. As far as Return to the Living, one side is me and one side is Corey, and we just, you know, took those photos ourselves. I did the, you know, kind of photoshopped them. And then after that, we have the Gloom and Doom Ballroom, which that I, you know, was just a digital illustration that I did using like all kinds of reference materials, like, and put them together. And same thing with like the, actually, we did do the, now that I'm thinking, the Creepy Crawly reissue. So that I just took photos that we had taken from around that time and kind of photoshopped and played around with them. And Corey, like Corey nitpicks everything. Like, you know, I'll send him work and he'll like, you know, all right, what about this? And so it's a lot of back and forth between us until we kind of settle upon something.
Yeah. And I'm sort of bouncing like all around. I forgot to
Sure,
ask
that's fine.
uh,
Go ahead.
when we were talking about Jason, but like, have you met any of the other members from Mr. Monster, and did you ever like really get familiar with them?
No, I mean, just you know, back in the day when we shared a ton of bills with them, but it was like, you know, Jason was the guy that we knew. So, you know, it's I never got to know any of the other guys. Like, so I can't tell you anything really about them. We played his memorial that they had. I'd be guessing at how many years have passed already. Actually, you know, kind of thinking about this, I couldn't even remember.
It was like December 2018, wasn't it?
That seems about right. Yeah. And that, you know, I ran into Mike Hideous at the wake, and I hadn't seen him in forever. Now he and I like stay into contact, texting. He was I don't know if you're aware of Mike Hideous from the Empire. Hideous ended up being in the Misfits for a little period of a time.
Oh,
He
really?
yeah, he had toured Brazil with them and some other. He wrote a whole book about his experience called "From the King of an Empire to the Shoes of a Misfit." So I recommend checking that out. You know, and he still occasionally resurrects the Empire Hideous to play some shows. And there's we the, I mean, you know, wakes are always odd, but there was an actor at the wake from, I can't even remember what movie now, that we were like, we were all kind of shocked, like, how does Jason know this guy? He was like an actor who we all recognized. I think he might have been from Goodfellas or something. And we were then all just like totally taken out of the moment. It was a needed you know, kind of jolt out of the, you know, what we were actually dealing with.
Right. And yeah, just what other big names have inspired you and just your experience in horror rock?
Well, I listen to like, I mean, this is my record collection back here. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I I listen to everything. You know, I tend to say like Abba to Zappa. You know, there's something to be gained from listening to all styles of music. Um, Aesthetically, I just happen to like, you know, the look of the, you know, the whole horror rock, death rock, whatever you want to call it, scene. So, you know, it's fun for me. It's fun to put on a show. But I listen to everything. I listen to all styles of music, constantly trying to hear what other people are doing. I'm not a trained drummer, so I just like, you know, listen and pick apart, you know, take something from this person, something from that person, and you know, it all kind of seeps in.
Yeah. And obviously you're friends with Corey, and you've been friends with Jason, like all the other members that have come throughout the years. Do you have like any other close friends like from when you were coming up, or? It could be like
Uh,
in your band or outside of your band, just anybody that had an impact on you.
no, I mean, I mean, there's a lot of, I've met so many people like kind of over the years. It's tough to, I'd hate to do anyone a disservice by not like kind of noting them, but like, there were time periods that, I hung out with this person and I'm not sure if you know Rasputina, the band,
No,
but they,
I mean,
they,
you're putting me on like a lot of them that I need to check out, and I
they,
really appreciate that too.
Rasputina were a Victorian kind of cello-based band. Uh, Melora played in Nirvana during, like, she's not on the Unplugged, but she toured with them and everything. And we had mutual friends, and I got to know her through mutual friends. We had like kind of as a joke credited her on the Rock and Roll Star Destroyer record. I'd given it to her, and then she like kind of wrote me and said, I'd be really pissed that you gave me credit for something I, didn't actually play on, except I actually like it. And we ended up striking up a friendship. So she played cello on one of the Bride songs, a band that I definitely would mention, and actually then that Corey and I have played in. There was the Stiffs Incorporated, who were like the refined version of the Brickbats. They were like, just we were like thrift store to their fine clothes. And when Paul had said, you gotta check this band out, and he had bought their cassette, and we listened to it and we're like, holy shit, they're kind of doing what we're doing, but they're doing it so much better. They sounded like, like the Buzzcocks, more of the like, late 70s British punk. And we got to know them very well. We did a split 7-inch with them. They did Panic in the Springtime. We had Funeral Drive on our side. And so they're a band who we then became like really close friends of. And they got signed to a subdivision of Def Jam or Def America, but they, I guess, were kind of difficult to deal with or weren't doing exactly what the label wanted, so they didn't really push them, and they kind of, their release was dead in the water. So they used to then, and it's almost as if at times they tried to alienate the audience. I'm not 100% sure, but like, they would experiment on songs on stage, even though like they wrote really tight punk rock songs. They, at a show we do with them, they'd play like a 10-minute song that made them almost sound like a prog band. So, but they remain to be like Whitey Sterling, the singer of that band, and Paul Twinkle, their guitar player, are still two of my good friends. In fact, I'm going to go have dinner with Whitey tomorrow night. He lives in Brooklyn and has forever. The Stiffs Incorporated, were a huge influence on My Chemical Romance. Like Gerard Way has cited them a bunch of times as being a band that influenced him. Post Stiffs Incorporated, Whitey did a band called the Umbrella Brigade, and that initial lineup, I guess, wasn't working for him. So Corey and I ended up playing on his second record with him. So we're on the second album of the Umbrella Brigade. Like, and that was something we had all kind of, again, Whitey brought in the song, let's say 90% written. And then in the studio, we kind of worked out the finer points. And we recorded that in upstate New York a bunch of years back. And there was a book that went with it. It's a really nice release if you can find it somewhere. So those guys, so Stiffs Incorporated. Fun fact: Mindless Self-Indulgence. I don't know if you know them. We used to play shows with them, and we were banned from Coney Island High. Was a fantastic venue on St. Mark's. They had a downstairs and an upstairs, and we were, on the night that we played with them upstairs, we were banned for life from Coney Island High's upstairs because we were just such a mess that they were like, all right, these guys are unprofessional jerks. But then some other time, Mindless Self-Indulgence was opening up for us, and like they went on to be, I think they ended up on Warner Brothers Records, and they've got a pretty big cult following. But that particular night, no one had come in through the door to see them, so, and the show was running behind, so we had to tell them, sorry, you guys aren't going on tonight, which to me is crazy. That I guess that's the way the world works, though. That at that time, they didn't bring anyone through the door and then they went on to get signed to a major label and sell out venues everywhere, while we continued to play clubs for, small crowds at best.
No, that's crazy though. Yeah. So outside of like Kiss, and it could be people on your wall, but like who are your personal greatest musical influences?
For me, drumming, Keith Moon is probably one of mine. Initially, when I started playing in the Brickbats, I had, and these are, I'm sure a lot of hundreds, thousands, millions of people share these touchstones. Like Charlie Watts was like my original kind of template for how I played from the Stones, like where I was just very kind of stoic and almost like detached from what I was doing. And then one day I decided, I want to go over the top. And then like I started like, just being almost like Keith Moon Animal from the Muppets, just like, standing up while I was playing, just like making, trying to draw as much attention to the drummer as possible. Cause like no band really, at the time had any drummers that were like, trying to be the center of attention. And that's kind of like each of us in the Brickbats, we were like all kind of vying for the audience's attention, which is I think what made us like a really, and still does to this day, an exciting live band. Cause it's, if you get bored looking at me, go see what he's doing, and go look at the other guy.
Yeah.
And so, Keith Moon. And then as far as playing, there was another great New York band called Jonathan Fire Eater that then became the Walkmen. And the singer of the band, Stewart, had done a solo act called, or more or less solo act called Child Ballads, which Paul from Stiffs Incorporated played in. But their drummer, Matt, like watching him play, like the first time I'd seen him play live from Jonathan Fire Eater, it was just and he plays, you could look up him performing with the Walkman. They played like Jay Leno and stuff. This guy is just like a monster behind the drums. So I wouldn't dare put myself in his league, but he definitely kind of changed the way I was looking at the instrument.
Yeah. Um, are there any bands that you know for a fact that you've like influenced, or that have noted you as
Uh,
their inspiration?
I don't know. We went through a period where like, we'd kind of, I don't want to say bitter, but we'd be like, oh, they're ripping us off. They're ripping us off. I don't know. They could just be us being, maybe we were paranoid. But at the time when we started doing it in New York, no one was doing it. And then all of a sudden, like, all these little bands, other bands started popping up. And it could have just been like, synchronicity or whatever. But so I don't know if anyone, I'd be flattered if anyone ever said, hey, the Brickbats, you guys really, I mean, I've had people come up to me at shows and tell us, how the band helped influence them, but nothing I could kind of think of off the top of my head specifically.
Yeah. Um, what genres outside of your own do you like listen to, like on your own free time?
Let's see. I kind of like I said, I'm avid as app. It really depends upon the mood. Like I'll listen to, like today when I was heading out and about doing errands, I had a playlist that I made of all like German metal bands. So I was listening to Tankard and Creator, and then I'll go and listen to like Towns Van Zandt and John Prine, and other like Americana stuff.
Mhm.
I'll listen to prog rock. I pretty much listen to anything.
Yeah.
What the morning program I listen to, because I get up early, because as I said, being a teacher, I still stay in that kind of get up early mode. So there's a morning WFMU, which is a radio station out of New Jersey. They have a morning program called Wake and Bake with Clay Pigeon, and it's
Yeah.
just a good like garden variety of left to center music. So I listen to that, but I just I listen. I get it. I go on different kind of say binges. Like I'll be really into black metal this week, and then now this week I'm listening to bubblegum glam rock. It's the
Yeah.
whatever the mood is, but I listen to all kinds of music, appreciate all kinds of music.
So I didn't mean to cut you off, but you said you're a teacher now, right?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, this year has been, our school has been open for and I'm not going to give my districts. I don't let any of the kids know of like the 9 to 5 and 5 to 9. I try to keep very separate because I know some parents, if they ever kind of put it all together, would have an issue with what I do. So I don't kind of tell my students about
Yeah.
my many when I started out as a substitute teacher, like, I finished my undergraduate work, started, substituting in 95, 96. And a kid, and thank God this is pre-internet, a magazine, Metal Maniacs, had done a feature on the Brickbats. And this kid came up to me with the magazine and he's like, "Is this you?" And, and I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'll give you a free T-shirt and a record if you don't, mention it to anyone." And
That's awesome.
he said, "Done deal." I gave him the T-shirt, the record, and to his credit, he didn't tell anyone. So I kind of keep it separate. As far as teaching, I teach art, so it's a good gig. I teach drawing and painting. I've been in the same district for 26 years now, or 24 years, 26 total. I like my job. It allows me. Summers are typically, not last year and probably not this year. Summers are typically then the time where I can focus on the music, and then breaks here and there. But it's a good gig. I wouldn't recommend getting into it at this point,
Yeah.
but when I got into it at a good point.
I've heard teachers say that it's like twice the work with the same pay at this point.
This year was, for me, it was 3 times because I was teaching for students in person, I was teaching for students who were hybrid, and I was teaching for students who were full remote. So for any given class that I was running, I was almost running like 3 sections of it. So it was crazy. I'm glad that the year ended, but I'm happy that my school district made the decision to have in-person learning. We were hybrid in September, where kids were in every other day. I was in every day, and then by February, they gave our students the option of showing up full time, and the majority of them picked it. So it gave a real sense of normalcy during all this, that, like, hey, we're here and we're doing this together.
Mhm.
So,
What subject do you teach?
I teach drawing and painting.
Oh,
Like, so it's studio art. I teach studio art 1 and studio art 4. One is like primarily freshmen, because it's a requirement that all the students in our district have to, or New York State have to take before they graduate. And then I teach art 4, which are for like seniors who aren't doing AP, which is for the kids who are going to go to college for art, but they like art. And and my seniors are my saving grace, because the freshmen, they're fun, but typically by the end of the day, they have me wanting to jump out the window
yeah.
and run to the Panera Bread to look for a new job. you know
Yeah. Well, yeah, just like sort of going back to like your influences and stuff. What would you say like your favorite projects and songs are, like outside of horror rock and all that? If you could
that
like if,
that that I
just
that
like,
I played it.
or no, just like just the outside of horror rock that you listen to on your own time, like what would you say would be your go-to if you could narrow
Yeah,
it
all right, I'll try to think all right, what I've been spinning. I've really been digging the band Idols a lot lately. I've been listening to them. I don't know if you know them. They're like a modern British band. I actually just bought tickets to go see them in October in New York City. Uh, so I like them a lot. They kind of remind me of the Libertines, like, but a little angrier. The Libertines were, if you're not familiar with them, they were like early 2000s British band that I had the good fortune of seeing at a very small club in Brooklyn. It was like right in front of Pete Dougherty, the troubled singer of the band, and he was just like a delight, like having private conversations with all of us in his general area before he'd like launch into a song. And this band Idols musically kind of reminds me of them. Then there's another British kind of, more of a oi street punk sound called Chubby and the Gang that I like. So those are the two off the top of my head that I could think of.
Yeah. And then the rest of my questions really they're sort of just more like your personal opinions and your views on things,
Okay,
I guess.
go
Um,
ahead.
but what would be like some of your favorite shows and movies? Do you like watch TV at all or
Yeah, I do. I love watching any like kind of trashy 80s film. I'll pretty much sit through. Although lately I've kind of been a good friend of mine had used the phrase, yeah, I shut the movie off because I'm not immortal, like realizing that no, I don't have all the time in the world, so I can't watch everything. But I watched a lot of trashy 80s stuff because it's almost like comfort junk food. I love comedies. I saw, I don't know if you've seen the sketch show on Netflix called I Think You Should Leave Now. Like they had a season 1 of that, season 2's coming back. So that Peep Show is a British comedy that I'm a big fan of. As far as movies go, uh, the Phantom of the Paradise is probably one of my favorites, of Paul Williams film. Paul Williams is probably one of the largest musical influences on me. I don't know if you know him. He wrote like a lot of schlocky songs, but they're good songs to me. So Phantom of the Paradise. American Movie is one of the best documentaries, if not the best documentary ever made. And Corey and I had done, I don't know if you've seen them, when we were promoting the Return of the Living Brickbats, we did a bunch of YouTube videos that are like really
I
like,
did where you guys did the t-shirt promo and you were talking you sort of like vlogged the whole thing. Yeah.
yeah, we those were all kind of based on American Movie. Like not the T-shirt, or the T-shirt one was based on their used to, that's the You're Gonna Like the Way You Look one.
Yeah,
That
that, yeah.
that was based on Men's Warehouse, which I don't know if it's a national chain, but it was here in New York, and they'd always have like these god awful commercials where the guy at the end of it would say very creepily, "You're gonna like the way you look." So that was us kind of lampooning that, but we had done other videos that were kind of based on American Movie. So that's another one of my favorite films. Just Over the Edge, one of the greatest teen movies ever.
Yeah.
Matt Dillon's first role. Another fantastic documentary, Hated by Gigi.
Yeah. Yep.
And I would always run into his brother Merle in the city, and I guess he thought he knew me because he would always just start talking to me as if we had just finished a conversation, like he'd turn and kind of almost launch like as if we were in mid conversation. But yeah, that's a fantastic documentary. Just gonna grab what's around, but like that's American Movie. That's a must see film. And like as far as like trashy 80s, and clearly I'm a collector. Like I buy junk like
Yeah.
Bonnie Kid. This is Bat with Wings. This is like some Japanese where kung fu movie where the makeup is based on Gene Simmons. So
Yeah.
I like trash, like the Desperately Seeking Susan novel starring Madonna. So
This question sort of like comes from me personally.
Mhm.
Just my own personal life. I'm obsessed with Mountain Dew.
Okay.
I collect all the flavors. Do you have like
Uh-huh.
any foods or drinks that you're like crazy obsessed with or
No, but what's funny, I don't really drink. I don't drink soda much, but when we the Brickbats started, we were a Jim Beam and Coke band. We were like forever drinking Jim Beam and Coke, and we'd mix it, drink it as everyone did. And when that first show we played down in North Carolina, we found like pre-mixed cans of Jim Beam and Coke. I don't know if they're still readily available down there, but our minds were like blown that they had them like in, because this is back, now during the pandemic, all these like canned cocktails have popped up, but we had never seen anything like that. And recently, Corey had sent me. We like. There's this Australian. I don't even know what exact metal genre they're in. Called either way. This I'll just call them metal. Australian metal band called King Parrot. Which, if you don't know them, check out their videos. They have the funniest videos. But they also recently put out a bourbon, and he sent me a video of them mixing a giant mug of their bourbon and like a soda. And I had written him back. I'm like, I can't even remember the last time I mixed a soda and a bourbon. So that is my goal for the summer, to have, some bourbon and Coke again. So, but I'm more of a bourbon and beer guy, which
Yeah.
is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I feel you. And obviously you're busy with teaching and music and all that, but do you have like any hobbies outside of music, like other than collecting film and all that?
Well, record collecting is, that's probably takes up most of my, because once you start going down holes of like, any given genre, you start to realize there's like a billion other bands that have never gotten their due. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of like kind of deep dives into different music genres, and I'm more of a collector than a audiophile. Like my audio equipment sucks, but I just keep buying records. Aside from that, I was running. I was a runner for I started running late in life. I had adopted a Boston Terrier back in 2010. No, 2000 and was it 2010? Yeah, it was 2010. 2010, and he would go for like, we adopted him secondhand. He was like 5.5 years old. And when I first got him, he would walk around the block and then want to go home. Then he wanted to walk around 2 blocks. And then one day over the summer, he like kept sitting down and I kept trying to bring him home. So I said, all right, let's see where you want to go. And we ended up walking for like 4 miles. And then 4 miles became 6 miles, and 6 miles became 8. And I was doing this like after work every day. And I started telling a coworker about it. And he said, well, why don't you join me on, I'm doing a 10-mile run for this like brewery. Like, you started the brewery, you ended the brewery. I'm like, all right, that sounds cool. I'll give it a shot. So I ran like a 10-mile road race, just training by walking my dog. And then once I had done that, I'm like, all right, I'm all right. So I started, I've done a half marathon. I've never done a full marathon because that's a lifestyle change that I'm not willing to do.
Yeah.
So running's a hobby. I try to garden. I'm not so good at it. I just try to keep the plants alive.
Yeah. Um, and obviously you've been to my state. Where all have you toured other than obviously like locally in North Carolina?
Oh no, the Brickbats we played before. Our last show before everything went south. We played Virginia, but we played LA. We played Canada. The other band, the Brides, we played down in Brazil even. So like we've been around a lot. I've I love playing. I know a lot of people hate it. I love LA. I've often said to anyone who listen, I'd move out there. Like I like the vibe of the place. They've got the greatest record store in the world there called Amoeba Records, which is like it's like a supermarket of records, like where I go in there and it's like I suddenly forget what I'm looking for, and then end up walking out with one record that I didn't even want to buy because I'm so overwhelmed and can't get it together. One of the last times I was there, I saw Keith Morris of Black Flag and the Circle Jerks, and now Off, if you're familiar with any of those bands, looking through like one of the record sections, and I was in the store with my good friend, this guy Pete Benedetti, who's a tremendous artist, and Jimmy Psycho, because we were out there for a Psycho Charger show, and I started running frantically around the place trying to find one of them to help me I needed to take a photo with Keith Morris. And so I found my friend Pete, and we casually went next to him, started looking through the records, and I said, hey Keith, big fan, longtime fan, and he was like, very cool, and we had a nice conversation. And then I said to him, can I take a photo with you? And he agreed, but you can tell I had totally ruined his day and bummed him out. Like I look
Uh,
like a smiling doofus, and he's like, just so upset and annoyed that I took him away from looking through the records. Hopefully he went back to it and found the record he was looking. I'll email you the photo so you can experience the fun and frustration of
of
it.
course. Um, do you guys have like CDs out at that shop, or like how extensive are they, would you say?
We've seen our stuff like used there, and actually, because Amoeba had a place also in San Francisco where we knew at the time, like in the '90s, we knew the person who was buying for the goth section, and she carried our stuff. So,
Yeah.
but now we pretty much handle. We don't do any distribution. Everything's done through the band camp. So, and physical media, we don't move as much as the digital these days.
Yeah. Um,
We still dream of putting out something on like a full length on vinyl. We've had our split 7-inch with the stiffs, and we did the skull microphone
right.
flexi disc for our friend Pete Von Erickson, who's from the Memphis Morticians, and also Fred Barker and Sons. He put out a flexi disc to promote his microphones. And we wrote a song, of course, to help him out.
Right. Um, you have any crazy stories from being on tour?
Uh, no, just like typical jackassery. Just be
Yeah.
nothing over the top. I mean, funnier stories are Psycho Charger tended to be the band that always we had like a crazy story. We had played Rue Morgues. They had like some festival that we had played, and it was like an all night. It ended up turning into after party, and we were staying like in a hotel that was walking distance from it, and the band and my friend Pete were all sleeping like together in this hotel room, and the fire alarm in the building starts to go off, and I get up, I start pulling my pants on, I'm trying to wake everyone up, and Jimmy, the leader of the band, goes, touch the doorknob. So I go over to the doorknob and I touch it, and he goes, is it hot? I go, no. He's like, then get back to bed. So, and it made sense at the time. I was, more time. Unfortunately, it turned out to just be like some kind of electrical short that ended up making the fire alarms go off rather than anything that would have cost us our lives.
Yeah.
And that, just a lot of really goofy pranks, like, and again with Psycho Charge, like crossing over the Canada border, like the Canadian border. We had just made it through because bands you're not supposed to cross without working visas,
Right.
and we had gone through all this, and the Greg, who happened to be driving, started to veer off on an exit, and Jimmy was like, you idiot, you're going back to the US, we're gonna have to do the customs all over again, which wasn't the case at all. But then just like dopey nonsense is what we're like. It's like being fifth graders, like just
Yeah.
being goofy. When we were out playing a show in LA and we were staying on the Queen Mary, one of the members of the band went to go meet a friend who we knew who lived out there, and while he was gone, we moved everything out of the room except for his stuff, and we all moved into another room, so that when he returned, it was like, where the hell did just nonsense like that. Just good tomfool. There was when Fright Barker and Sons played Heavy Rebel a couple of years ago, they have a slap off contest for upright bass players. Have you ever been to Heavy Rebel? Because that's down there in North Carolina.
I haven't really been to any concerts or anything.
Okay, that's a good one to check out. But they do like a slap off, or at least they used to. And this guy lit his upright bass on fire, and he had gotten some of the fluid on his face, so he ended up with like a full face of, looked like he was wearing a beard of flames. He managed to put it, but as he was on fire, a member of our band happened to be on mushrooms and witnessing it all was like, is this real? Is this happening? No, his face is on fire.
Jeez. On a more serious note, what do you think about this virus?
Well, I don't know about by you, but here in New York, it's seems like a lot of people have gotten the vaccine. Places are starting to ease their restriction. I'm vaccinated, so I don't have an issue with that. Everyone makes their own choices, but I'm vaccinated, so if establishments have the you can wear a mask or not, I tend not to, because I'm hoping things will get back to
Oh,
normal sooner than later. Like I said, I bought a ticket to a show in October already, so I'm ready to get started.
yeah. Um, how was lockdown for you? Like when everything was completely shut down?
Uh, Well, I still had to, teach at that point. They made us, we had to switch over to Google Classroom and teaching remotely. So I stayed busy, which I guess is good, because then you can't really focus on too many things. Fortunately, my family members were all fine during all this. We think my father had it, but he kind of weathered it all right. And he never got diagnosed. So I mean, I consider myself very fortunate. Like, and also with my job, that was pretty steady. I feel for all the people. Like, I have a lot of friends who are in the service industry and bars and restaurants, and things haven't been as good for them. But I kept busy. So I mean, I certainly miss going out, but I can be pretty solitary. So I didn't mind the not being being forced to go out, and kind of happy being alone. Um, but as far as like when the whole thing started, I can remember going food shopping and seeing like all the shelves bare, and like people like wearing their face masks and rubber gloves, and thinking, oh my God, these are the end of days. What is going to go on?
Yeah. Um, what have your thoughts been on all the riots and the division and all that?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer any questions like that. That's like beyond my pay grade. I don't I'll listen to anyone who wants to talk, but as far as
You're
like
not,
weighing, I'm just one guy. What am I going to say that's going to make a change? If well, I act locally. Like, I get involved in my local town politics when I can. Like, if I think the town is doing something that they shouldn't, I get involved. But as far as beyond that, I'm not qualified.
yeah. I mean, it you lose friends with stuff like that too.
I-
So
and I think my biggest issue is that everyone, like anyone whose mind is made up and can't see any other way. It's like, you got to be able to
yeah,
like be open to other people's points of views and perspective, and so that's all I'll say on that.
yeah, yeah, I feel you. What did you think about January 6th or 7th of this year, I believe it was, when the Capitol got
the, the insurrection, I mean, it was a total failure at all levels. That they weren't, that our government wasn't prepared for that. And but again, I don't want to comment too much on that. But I mean, for
yeah,
me, that's a sad day in the country when the Capitol gets it. I understand people's frustrations, but I don't, you know, I don't agree with their way of showing those frustrations.
there's a right and wrong way to do things, and I think
Right.
they definitely did it the wrong way.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, for sure. And just not to, because I at some point I'm going to be looking at how many more questions you got. Are we?
Um, I have like maybe 10 more.
All
Yeah.
right. Because then I gotta get going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean I've kept you for a while. I appreciate you staying through them. Um, but yeah, what have your thoughts been on the Biden administration so far? If you
Uh,
feel
no, I'm gonna skip on that, because
yeah,
and it's like I don't, in a way. I mean, I will say this, with when Trump was president, I was constantly aware of what our president was thinking. With Biden, I don't know, and in a way that's kind of better. But I'm sure if I started to dig around and look too deeply, I wouldn't feel good. But it's our president currently takes up less of my headspace, but you know, I don't really have
Yeah.
I again, like I said, I tend to try to focus more locally because that's something I can control. I can't
Right.
like I as far as politics go, it's when you're at that what how much can we really change? It's like
Okay.
we don't have it's their ball, it's their game.
Yeah, I completely respect that. I just like to get people's thoughts, you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess I'll just skip to my last four because I don't want to keep you for too much longer. I know you got stuff to do. Um, but do you have like a message for your fans or anything?
Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm always I'm thrilled that anyone gives a shit that we're that we're still out there making music. So I'm beyond appreciative that anyone cares enough. I appreciate that you want to talk to us and possibly let some new people know about us.
Of course. Yeah.
It's I'm thankful. I mean, we've had, in my opinion, we've had a good career. Like it's been good. We can still play shows and people still care enough to come out, which
Yeah.
I feel good about.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like me and my friends, it's really different because I have the friends that I have that are open-minded to music and stuff and don't just listen to Travis Scott and
Mhm.
all of them.
Yeah,
It's like it's hard to find people that are open-minded, but it's like, I try when I can to put people on.
yeah. Well, at some point I said to Corey, or like, it's almost like what we're doing now is the way we looked at people who listened to jazz when we were growing up. It's like it really is a real such a small subsect of society that's into this kind of music. So I'm thrilled that with anyone who's into it.
Yeah. And then just my last three. Have you guys experienced like any negative energy for like your band or anything? Like if it has anybody had any negative comments or anything?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the few things that I could think of at one time after a rehearsal out in Long Island, and this was probably back in '95. We were leaving we after practice we'd gone to Taco Bell because that was what we did, and Paul had a pentagram on his shirt, and some woman with all this Bible literature came up and more or less started screaming at us, and I think his line to her was, "Lady, you are one cuckoo chick," and she
Yeah.
like started throwing all these pamphlets that she had in the car at
Yeah.
us. So, and and of course you always, especially like if we leave any of the, if we're done up and we leave the venue, we've had good experiences and we've had like experiences where people are less than thrilled to see us walking
Yeah.
around. Like, I mean, probably the most hostile audience we ever encountered was we had played a show in Philadelphia at a punk rock squat, which you'd assume they would be open minded, but they, for whatever reason, hated us. And started like hurling like glass bottles at us, just like decided right off the bat. I think I'm fairly certain some of them were probably anti-Semitic and had assumed that we were Jewish, maybe just because we were New Yorkers. So they wrote like Jew-free zone like on the wall, and so that was probably that had nothing to do with the horror aspect. That was them just being anti-Semitic scumbags.
If you could give a message to anybody that was just closed-minded to you and your style and your music, what would it be?
I just give it a listen.
Yeah.
Just
Let
listen
it
to it.
speak
And
for itself.
if it'll move, hopefully it'll move you. Just try to just give it a listen.
Be open-minded. Yeah.
Yeah. Shut up.
Um,
Turn off the lights. Turn on the music. Give it a listen.
yeah. Um, how could you how could you see the horror rock, horror punk scene changing in the future?
I mean, in my opinion, it's just seemed to have grown. Like there are more bands that do it. There are more festivals that celebrate it. So I hope it, continues in that direction. That it'll gain new fans. But again, when we started in New York, we were the only band, and then before you knew it, there were a bunch of others. I mean, granted, there were other bands before us, but at that particular moment in '95, no one else was doing it that we were aware of. And then they all started popping up. But, now you got a whole genre of them that play festivals. So I'm all for it. Hopefully they'll be kind enough to include us in some of the larger festivals down the road.
Yeah. And my last question, I'll close out with this because I don't want to keep you any longer, but do you have any advice for anybody coming up on the scene right now, or?
I would just say have fun, because if you're not having fun, why are you doing it? That's because that's always been our thing. Like, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it. So
Yeah.
just have fun, and if it feels good, play it. So like, and don't be concerned if you're going to find an audience. If you find an audience, great, but it's ultimately do it for yourself.
Yeah. You have anything to add?
That's it.
Well, I appreciate you sitting and talking to me for like an hour and a half now. I didn't.
You got it. So, all right, I'll send you that Keith Morris picture, and I'll reach out to Corey and see if you can, if you feel you need like any more of the answers about lyric wise, maybe he'll.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious. So, I mean, if you could, I would appreciate.
Yeah, and check out, I don't know if you're aware, he's doing like a singer songwriter thing now, called The Beasts of Least Concern, and that's where he's got his book through it. And again, like, his lyrics, in my opinion, are brilliant, and so he's got them collected in a book, and he's got this new singer songwriter thing going on.
Right.
Check that stuff out. But yeah, I'll see if hopefully he'll be able to carve out some time. Again, the man is overscheduled. He's got a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sitting down and talking for me, and I hope dinner goes well with your friends tomorrow.
Thank you. All right. Well, pleasure talking to you. You have a great night now.
Take care. You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.